Hi guys, Shade Raven here. I'm going to do a quick little demonstration of doing automation for a creature, kind of like I did before with the Bloodseeker Sturge one. But it's we had someone out on the forums, Larsenix, struggling to do one. I thought maybe I'd pop out and show exactly how I would do what he was looking for on that particular creature. So let's go at it. So he was looking for some help with the Necrophidius. So let's pull, we have the Bestiary here, but I'm going to go ahead just to show that it's open. We could see that we have the correct module there. We'll come in and go find the Necrophidius. And it pops up here with the creature here. I guess using this dark background makes the ID look very green and glowy. Anyway, so here's your typical stat block you see for a creature. So unlocking it, well, we can't unlock it from the base module, so what we'll want to do is come over here to this list again, and I'm just going to take this and drag it over here, create a copy of it. That way I can do whatever I want with it, obviously, and it doesn't affect the base creature. So we'll close this guy, open up this guy, and we see that. Now we can unlock him. And then as you scroll down here, the ones we're really looking at, because this stuff is just all base stuff that's already working well in the system, we can see its powers. So we come up here in the options, and in the options menu, scroll down here, and we should be able to find the automation section, right? That is a good question. Show ability automation field. Right now it's off. That's why we don't see the ability to add to it. I'm just going to go ahead and turn that on so I can see it. Probably need to close this, reopen this, scroll down again, and we can see the automation. I don't think it was there before. Maybe I've gone crazy. Possible. Now with the Dance to Death, it's got a few things that we definitely want to look at to take advantage of the automation features that Trendlow put in here. So for starters, read down here, the first thing that jumps out at you is the DC saving throw. Now for me, when I'm doing this, sometimes you'll have like, it'll say, does 66 fire damage, and then afterwards it'll say creatures get to make a basic reflex saving throws, especially true with the basic saving throws. Oftentimes, even though it's not the first thing that appears on the list, I will go grab that saving throw string and automate that first, because I kind of want my automation to be in order of how a DM is going to want to apply it. So I've captured this, kind of hard to see in this dark background, but that has the DC 18 will save. So down here in automation, I've captured that. Now to show that this is the exact string we're looking to capture for automation, we have to put it in quotes. The quotes let the automation process know between this and this, that's what we're looking for. I don't necessarily think we need the period in there, so I might get rid of that. But essentially, whatever we pick up in that section is going to be what the automation is going to look to act off of. So we got the quotes down, and the DC 18 will save. We use the vertical bar. At least on mine, it's above the, what's that, the backslash? Yeah. And put in the vertical bar there. That now tells us we are, going from the string that we're looking for the information to capture into the actual automation process itself. For saving throws, and I think my other video went over this, I haven't actually watched it in a little while, you just type in a simple save. This lets it know that the command string that's going to follow is related to saving throws. So it's already starting to know that this is a save throw process. Then we got to put in which of the saving throws, which of the 3 saving throws this is acting off of. This is obviously will. So you just type in simply will. And then, you know, with this one not needing basic or anything, you don't need much else but the DC of this. So for this one, I just put in a bracket, left bracket, DC, and those are the square brackets, and then a colon to let it know that that's the command, and put it 18, and that's the the will save throw we're looking for. So right off of that, if we just stop right there and lock that down, we can come up and see we now have, as we highlight this, the DC-18 will save is expecting automation off of it. Now, if it'll give you this if you have the quotes right, but write the command wrong, and nothing will happen off of it. But let's double check, make sure we have this working accurately for us. So in this case, we're going to take this necro and just show that that part of it's working. And I think a lot of times when you're doing this, you're better off honestly going piecemeal. Let's get rid of this orc and the spider. Because you want to make sure each step along the way is correct. Because if you try to put in the whole thing and something goes wrong, sometimes it's a little harder. I guess we could have kept the one of those out so I could play off of it. Let's see what we got in here for characters. I don't have any characters here, so let's go ahead and just go out and grab and import real quick, which is taking longer than expected. Some of the auto one stuff here, but let's go just for the heck of it. We'll go grab Nario just to have somebody in here. So we've gone out and grabbed him. He's now in here. We'll throw him on the combat tracker so we have a nice little target. And now we can see up here on our Dance of Death, inside here we can see as we read this that this is already automated. And outside here we can see we can grab it just off the combat tracker and then go ahead and tell Nario to see if he can make a will save, see if it works. That pops in, we can see it drops in, shows that he rolled a 25, that's a success against what would be a DC 18 that we can see up here. And we can see at least that section of it is working. If you wanted to set this up so the players could roll it for themselves, you would come in here. It's a good question because I don't honestly remember where each section is. Show turn order, but there's obviously a section in here where I can player roll targeted saves. If we turn that on, then when I would drag and drop this on here and tell Nario to make that save, it would then put in the automation string to let him know he's supposed to make that save. And then the player, oops, this is obviously an old version of it, who's coming in could come anywhere on a sheet that has his will saving throws, roll a will saving throw for himself, and it would check it against that DC 18. And again, he's really doesn't want to be dealing with the Dance of Death, so he's resisting it with all his heart. But that's how that would work for now. It's obviously not important, but just in case anybody's curious on how to get the PCs to roll for themselves off of the automation, it's as simple as that. I'm going to turn it off now so we don't have to keep coming to his character to get him to do his thing. So now we're back to the Necrophidius. For this one, now we could see we got the saving throws working, and we want to look at other things maybe we want to automate. So to my thinking, even though you could easily keep track of this in your head and just say I'm not going to apply it to it, and this is more of a reminder. At some point I am sure there's going to be additional automation that'll handle things like immunities to powers and stuff, but for now what I'm going to do is I want to show this. If now obviously Nario didn't make a critical success saving throw, but if he had, I want the ability to capture this particular part of the automation and indicate that he will now be immune for 24 hours. So what I would do is I capture that, could cut it. Now each of these automations have to be on a separate line by themselves. So we could see the DC 18 will save has been set up correctly. We'll want to hit enter there again with the quotes to show this is the section we're going to automate off of, and then the vertical bar to separate those two. Now for this one, this is just using effects to put in some text to let me know that this character or the target, whatever it may be, is going to be immune to the Necrophidius's Dance of Death. So for that, all I really need to do is give it an effect. For effects, you just start always with the effect, capital E, lower FFECT, just typing in effect. with again the colon to indicate that you've set up the command that you want to follow after the initial one. So we're looking to add effects to this with what we want to appear as an effect on a character. So for this one, for me, I always put in the immune command. Again, now if this had been, let's say we wanted them to be immune to fire, it would just type in fire, and then maybe a duration if it was a duration that was, you know, usually a sort of a combat length duration, like around a minute, even 10 minutes or more, that's easily, kept track of during combat. Longer durations, most of the time, you just kind of have to make mental notes on it. In this case, we're going to be seeing one that's for a day. And, while there are some passage of time things for Pathfinder 2 and Fantasy Grounds, kind of the minutia that is involved with like a 24-hour duration is a little bit difficult to attract or to track, exactly. So most of the time that's going to be in the hands of the dungeon master, game master, to kind of keep track of. So in this case, I'm just setting up immune that I'm going to have them be immune to Dance of Death. Again, this will not make it so that they're immune to it, but it is a reminder when you see the effects and traits on a character or target that they will be immune. Now you'll notice on this one, because it's a long effect, it's going to scroll down here. It doesn't mean that this is like a third line. It's actually a second. If I were to take this to drag out, we could see clearly this is still a single line command, and they have to be. This all needs to be on a single line to ensure that it's working correctly. So we come down here, and now we got this. This just says on a critical success, they're going to be immune for 24 hours. So if I was in game and this was combat was going on, and let's say, let me open up effects so I could see it. We're going to get rid of that PC roll since that's no longer applicable for what we're doing. And I could sit here and say, okay, he made a critical save. Necrophidius, let's just have him targeted so I don't have to keep dragging and dropping. Had picked him. It's funny because now that I look at it, I was using the one we're designing, which is fine, to work off of Nario. So I'm going to get rid of this, take our new version of the Necro, pop him in here, and then now with this one, we go down here, we could see not only does he have the will save, but he's got the first effect, which is the immunity. So in this case, again, I'm going to say, let's go ahead and target Amnario. And if I were to click this, he had made his critical save, and click this, now we come down here, we can see on Amnario, he has an immunity to Dance of Death. Again, for me, that's a reminder. If you come down here and try to make him a saving throw, it doesn't going to say, he's immune to it automatically, so he automatically saves. But it at least indicates in case, you have a number of characters in a long combat, it's easy to forget everything, that's going on. Well, not everything, but, forget individual pieces with everything going on. And now we have that indicator that he was immune. When the time is up that you figure his immunity is ended, we can simply delete that and we're back to normal. So now we got that to work. When you get more comfortable, and be honest, you'll eventually get more comfortable. You do this often enough, you won't need to go in and to maybe do these one at a time. You can come in and do them all at once. But if you're really new to it, I really do suggest working this piecemeal, making sure you get each one to work. Now some of these are going to be very similar, so you might decide I could cut and paste some of this and put it together so that I could make it a little bit quicker, but we're still going to handle this individually. So as we come down to the successful saving throw, we can see the creature is unnerved by the swaying and becomes flat-footed until the end of the Necrophidius' next turn. So now this one's a little bit different. This is dealing with flat-footed and has a duration. So the flat-footed one here will capture that because that's obviously the key component. We want to know what this is triggered off of. As a matter of fact, it might even be good to say flat-footed to the end of the Necrophidius' next turn. So we're going to capture all of that. So not only do we know what effect we're going to tackle, but the duration off of which it's going to be. So again, quote the whole string there of what we're trying to attack, and the vertical pipe to let us know that we're oops, quote, end quote, vertical pipe, to let us know that we're finished the capture section and we're going in after the actual automation that we want to apply. So again, this is an effect because flat-foot is going to appear as an effect on the character sheet, similar to if you were to just come up here to the effects part and take flat-footed and drag it onto Omnario, maybe setting the duration and all that within there. But with the automation, we're just trying to bring all that in with a single click. So we know this is an effect. We can semicolon it. Now what I like to do, and again this is completely a personal thing because all you really need is the flat-footed section, but I like to know what the source was of each individual effect. So I'll type in Dance of Death here. That lets me know that it's off of a Dance of Death application, so that when I look at the flat-footed, where did it come from? Again, if it's a long combat and maybe it swings around in a long round to someone and they see, why am I flat-footed? You can look and say, oh yeah, remember the Dance of Death saving throw you made? It made you flat-footed for that short period of time. Now in this, because we're doing this command line, you want to use the semicolon because that lets you know, like in normal effects, that you're now separating kind of the first part of the effect from each additional section. So we got the semicolon in there, and now we just need the simple flat-footed condition. So with that, I've now added in flat-footed. So now we know we're going to be applying flat-footed off of this automation. But we know we also need a duration. Now in this one it says Necrophidius' next turn, which is normally a simple duration 1. We know, hey, this is going to go for a full round to him. But it says at the end of the Necrophidius' next turn. So to ensure that you get that, what we need to do is, since this is going to be applied on the creature's turn, since it's using a 3 action power, we want this to go to the end of the creature's turn. But it has to be the next creature's turn. And what's going to happen, if you just type in end here for duration 1, it's going to end on this turn, because it's basically saying look for your first indicator, the decrement indicator on the number of rounds. This turn is going to come into an end because normally duration goes to the start of a turn. The start of a turn would be next round when this creature's turn came up, because it would have not come to a start. But because we're asking for end, we're going to hit the end of this turn, and we want it to actually go to the end of the turn that follows. So that's going to be a duration 2. It's not really 2 rounds. It's really saying that's 2 end of turn events for this creature, and that will ensure that we go through not just the end of this round, but the end of the round that follows. So that's where you do it. And some of these things, you're just, like, you might run into similar things like this, and the easiest thing to do is to toy with it and see, well, how does this affect gameplay? But I'll let you know for that end of turn marker, yes, it's going, if it's a power, if it's, let's say, a reaction that will be happening outside of the creature's turn, and you want it to end on the next, the next event of its end of turn, that would be a duration 1, because it would then eventually come to the creature and end it. Similarly, let's say you had a reaction that had an application that said, you want it to have a full round. If you were to put a duration of 1 in it, it would hit the start of the creature's turn. So if that came up right away, that would not quite apply correctly. But in this case, it's end to end off of its own turn to get to a full round of it being able to use this through the rest of this round, which with 3 actions probably means it's already over, to the end of the next round. Alright, so now we got this. Let's go ahead and close this, and we can come up here and see that this part of this has now been automated. We can see there's an effect, Death to Dance, flat-footed, duration 2 with ends. That allows us to know that we are ending this shortly. Okay, so now that we have that set up, what we're going to do is get rid of this old one that doesn't have that aspect of it, pull in this newer version of the Necro, and see that that is in there. So we can now see we can apply 3 different aspects of the automation up on this. We could toss a saving throw on Mario. If we, of course, he's going to save now that I want to, but in the event that it hadn't saved, let's go ahead and set this as the Necrophidius. I keep saying it differently each time, don't I? Its turn. He had just popped off his 3-powered Dance of Death. Oh yeah, this was a success, so that would be perfect actually. And now we go, okay, he succeeded at that, but he still gets these successful saving throw effects. Looking off of that, we can now see down on the Narios, he has the Dance of Death, a flat-footed condition, and it'll be kind of a couple of rounds before it comes to its conclusion. If we were to play ahead, we could look at a couple of different ways, like, hey, did the flat-footed work? If we throw an attack at him, which a creature didn't have the actions um, for some reason that did not target him the way I wanted it to. Why didn't you target him? Was it because I'm laying it over top of the sheet? Possible. We could see that he's now uses jaw attack at Nario, who has defensive effects of -2. Clearly, he has the flat-footed condition applied to him. His armor class is normally only 13, so it didn't help in this case, but as we know, flat-footed can have a lot of residual effects, not just on armor class. And there are going to be certainly times where it's going to be a difference between a miss and a hit. If we scroll through, we could see, yep, Aminario's turns come. He's still flat-footed because the duration still applies. And you notice this came down to 1 round left. That's to indicate we had hit an end of turn, and the first of the end of turn indicators came along and dropped that by a duration of 1. Still leaving 1 round left. That's why we needed a 2 on that, because we had to hit that end of turn. Necrophidius would then be able to take its normal 3 actions, which it could just sit there and go, jaw against the flat-footed Amnario, come up with its second attack, and just be like, hey, I got you flat-footed. I'm going to just chew on you for a little while. And we could see that the defensive effects are definitely kicking in for him, and even as it comes up with its 3rd jaw attack at poor Amnario. It's continually showing he's flat-footed. That creature's turn ends, and now we can see we've come to 2 end-of-turn events, and that gets rid of the flat-footed condition because we wanted it to end at the end of its next turn. So that all worked exactly the way we wanted it to. So we can kind of come in here and take a peek at what's left. I guess this is not going to be quite as quick as maybe I wanted it to be, this video, but hopefully for anyone who really wants to see a slow roll on the automation, they can really see each step being built on a creature. So in the failure of a saving throw, we could see that the target becomes stunned 1, and after it recovers, it's still flat-footed to the end of the Necrophidius's next turn. So this is one of those indications where we could sit there and say, we have flat-footed to the end of the next turn up here. This is essentially going to be doing the same thing, because while the stunned 1 won't necessarily be ending until that Nario's, in this case, his turn, the essence is that eventually that stunned 1 is going to have its application before the Necrophidius' next turn comes along. So we're going to still be doing a Dance of Death flat-footed for a duration of 2 that will end on the Necrophidius' next turn. So in this case, while you could come down here, capture this, and set up a text that gives it the flat-footed condition till the end of the next turn, just like you did up here, you already have this up here. So I would, when it comes to the applying of this failure condition, I would just use the flat-footed condition that we've already coded in it. If you really wanted to have both in, you have to make sure that the text that you're capturing is differentiated from the text that you captured before. If you use the same text string twice, it's going to pick them, it's going to grab the first instance of that, and you're not going to see actually a second automation applied, because it's going to think, well, we found the conditions that apply to this automation we're looking for, the string, already here. There's no need to keep looking down through for it. So in this case, we're going to use this for the failure features, like that works essentially the same as the success ones. We just need to be able to handle the stun process. So we have becoming stunned 1. Depending on how much you want to see, you just want to pick up whatever you think into what you want to become capture for automation. So I'm just going to take the stunned 1 part of it. Again, this is not 2 separate lines. This is, if we really stretch this out, we'll see that that's all part of 1 line. So when you come up to this next process of it, we want to give it its own line as well to indicate it's a new part of the automation. Again, we put it in the stun with between quotes, the vertical bar. Stunned is an effect, so we type it in effect. Again, I like to put in dance of death to indicate where the stunning had come from. And then we have the stunned 1 condition. Stunned, because that's something you have to sort of watch yourself. Doesn't really have a duration because it comes to the player's turn. Stunned has, as you gain more stunned, you might actually lose more than 1 turn. So like a stunned 4 on a player's turn with a normal 3 actions would be decreased down to 1 to indicate they lost 3 of their actions, so they'd still be stunned until they get a 4th action. So in this, we're just going to be applying effect stunned so that when a creature fails its saving throw, it has that. And because we're kind of getting into this, and I don't know if I want to keep dragging this on forever, I'm going to show what it was like to take something you've seen before and cut and paste it onto a new line. Now again, we need another separate one, and I want to look at the critical failure, which is as failure but stun 3. The only real difference between this is the duration of the stunning. Up here we still have the flat-footed effects that we're getting from off of our success. So I want to go up here to the stun 1/1 and capture this entire line. Pop it down here, just cut and paste that all out. The only difference we're looking for is that we're looking for the stun 3 effect. So if I put in a 3 there and then come back out here to the end of this, I can see now I have a stun 3 with the effect. Let me know it's from off a Dance of Death, and a stun 3 effect application, which will be what affects the character directly, which of course stunned has automation for it. So if Nario, while being stunned, gets attacked, it'll give the indicators that normally come with being stunned. So again, we could see as we close this, we have the stunned 1 automation set up for it, and as we come down to critical failure, we can see there's a stunned 3. So closing this and bringing in the latest version of this, we can come down here and see, yep, we have our will save now. We have the immunity off of a critical success. We have the flat-footed one, which happens not just on a successful saving throw, but also off of a failure and a critical failure. So this will be applied in most situations. And then if there's just a failure, we also have the automation to set up an effect to apply stunned, and a critical failure applies stun 3. So like normal, Nario gets attacked, he goes and throws a saving throw. Of course we get a success. He is really good against the Dance of Death. He must be light on his feet. But we'll just, for the sake of argument, say he had failed it. We can come down, throw a single round of stunned on him. And again, what I'd said before, we know he also gets flat-footed after a stunned ends, and because the net effect is going to be to the end of the creature's next turn, we can then go ahead and take the Dance of Death flat-footed aspect to it and apply it as well. If we were to combine flat-footed with stunned 1, the problem there would be that when the stunned effect ends, we couldn't just delete the stun saying, okay, it's come to Mario's turn. Instead of having 3 actions, he now has 2 because he was stunned for the first one. We delete that to get rid of it, and then all of a sudden we're losing the flat-footed effect off of it. Or we'd have to, finagle with trying to edit an effect in the middle, of a round, which has its own hazards in it. It certainly would be possible to put it on there, set the duration correctly, and then as he sheds the stunned effect, you could then come in here and backspace this to get rid of that, and then have the rest of it be the flat-footed part of it. Personally, I kind of like to have them separated so we could see each individual property as it applies. But everybody's how everybody wants to do things certainly can be different. That's just how I do it. So then he'd come down, and Mario got that. He's got still 2 actions left he could use. He's still going to be flat-footed till the creature's turn comes up, and everything's working as we expected. So that is kind of a quick example of how Dance of Death would work. Now let's look at the paralysis side of things, which we could see is part of the Jaws attack. But because it's got saving throws and stuff, instead of just simple additional damage, it has need for its own kind of section in its own automation. So taking a look at that, I'm going to go through this one a little bit quicker because I'm probably sure some people are already dozing off while watching this. We're going to come back to the Necrophidius' base creature we're editing and come down. We see that the beginning of this one is just the DC 20 Fortitude save. That one, simple automation like we saw before. Quote, DC 4220 or DC 20 Fortitude save, vertical bar. Again, because it's not an effect, it's a saving throw, we start with the save indicator. That lets us know that this is now using the saving throw automation. It's a Fortitude this time. Fortitude with a DC of 20. Again, if it had been something with damage and basics, you would then put in brackets basic, and that would say when this guy rolls the saving throw, any damage that follows would follow the rules of basic saving throws. So the usual no damage, half damage, full damage, and double damage, depending on the severity of the success. I don't know if that makes any sense. Of the saving throws. So that particular aspect we'd have in real quick. If I were to close it, we could see down here, I guess I could have showed up there, that we already got this captured, and it will roll a saving throw. I could even test it off of here so you don't have to keep putting it over there and see, oh yeah, sure, I'm getting a saving throws attack. While he was very light on his feet, Amnario seems to struggle a little bit against paralysis effects. So we got the first part of that done. We got our new line. Now we're looking to see what happens when you fail a saving throw. Oh, you become paralyzed. Initially, the easiest thing to do is just say, okay, I want to set up the paralysis section. So I grab paralysis, put it in quotes, put down the vertical bar, and now paralysis is an effect, a condition. So we're using the effect thing, and then we're just typing in, well, I like Dance of Death to let know what's going on. And then paralysis, paralyzed. Yay, it's a good thing I don't remember everything. Looking in here real quick, we could see paralyzed is the words we're looking for, not necessarily paralysis, even though that's the net effect. So we come back here, put in paralyzed. So off of that, we will have paralysis captured, and we'll know that we're applying paralysis to it. But probably should read through this a little bit more to see whether or not there's aspects to this that we'll need to follow thereafter. In this, we could see that a new saving throw gets made at the end of each turn, and the DC is cumulatively decreased by 1 for each attempt. That would be extremely hard to automate. So again, this is one of those aspects that are going to be reliant upon the DM or the player, who could add, sort of to indicate the decreasing DC. You could always throw in a modifier, a +1 when rolling for Amnario at the end of that creature's turn. But I'll also probably, for myself, I usually put in some sort of indicator off of the effect to let know what happens. So we could see up here where we have the Dance of Death, which is just informational. We can add that extra information. It won't affect the paralyzed thing as long as you put it before the semicolon like normal effects. But we can put in a little more in there so we know that there's more to it than just that the creature is paralyzed for an indeterminate amount of time. So I might put in end of turn save, DC -1 per round. And now when the effect goes on, and again, if you want to keep this more concise, a little more compressed, you don't like long effects, putting down this would just affect paralyzed, and keeping track of that mentally. Certainly a good way to go if that's the way you prefer. But I'm going to put in the extra information so I could keep track of this, or let's say that the session gets interrupted and we start another one, and we can kind of pick it up from there. Could even put in like what the current DC is, starts at 20, but the next round will be 19. I could have put in a 19 and then try to remember that the next round it comes up it'll be an 18 and keep changing it that way. But there's going to be some things that are always going to be handled a little bit by hand. I'm sure ideally Treadmill with nothing better than to have some future date, or even things like the, let's say we throw uh, degradation, for lack of a better term, um, of the DC will be handled automatically, and I'm more than sure he can handle coding that process. But there's obviously things that still could be handled relatively easily by the GMs out here, and we can get to that at a later date as he tackles some of the more important things that are currently on his plate. So getting back to the automation, we now have the paralyzed effect with some new um, aspects to it that let us know what's going on. And we can see up here now, as we highlight paralyzed, we can see all the effects laid out with the extra text that we know came off of Dance of Death. There's an turn save and a DC -1 per round when this is applied. So again, let's say he had gone for that, had failed, and I wanted to toss at him the paralysis. We apply it over here. We can see Imnario now has this. And then, so what I was saying before, if Imnario had come around and it's now, he's paralyzed, so we can't do anything. Like, okay, this is the end of your turn. Currently, Imnario would then be like, oh yeah, I get to save at the end of my turn. What can I do? And I could either let him roll his own saving throw and say, okay, it's down to, I could see that initially it was a DC 20, but now now it's 19 because you've come to your first round of save. Go ahead and make a fortitude save. And he could just roll simply like that, and the DM could watch. I'm going to oscillate between GM and DM too. And then that one he would fail, so we might come around. His turn comes around again. It's like, okay, back up, still paralyzed, but it's still alive. The creature's starting to ignore me and move on to other things. Can I make a saving throw? Yeah, I could do a fortitude now at a DC of 18. He rolls. He finally hits it. You come up and say, okay, yep, you've cleared that. You're no longer paralyzed. We would delete that effect. I could have also, for the automated creature, could have had drag to drop it, said, hey, you're +1 against this, so um, the DC's now 19 instead of 20, and dropped it on there for the automation if I didn't want to have him worrying about it, and see, okay, yeah, I could drag that, drop that. It might come up with a failure had he rolled a 19. Well, it would come up with a failure had he rolled a 19. And you could add extra things in, like like giving him a temporary saving bonus, stuff like that. But honestly, quicker ways is just simply kind of keep track of those things individually. Eventually, he'll be able to shed it. And if you kind of forget um, to apply some of that stuff, usually you can kind of say, "Oh, do you remember how many rounds we gone through?" And usually get a pretty honest answer as players keep track of how much things have affected them along the way, anyways. But again, you could have obviously, instead of having the -1 per round, I could have put in, DC 19 round 2, and tracked it that way, and know what the actual effects are. But there's one more aspect of this we would want to put in. Once he had the paralysis, or if he had succeeded at any point, he also gets to be immune. So again, like we were looking at the Dance of Death immunity, we're looking at 24-hour duration, and we just want to be able to add indicator that Imnario, now that he's pulled out of that paralysis, if the creature tries to, or the creature lands another jaw attack that has a necrophitic paralysis on it, he will be immune to it in future instances where it might apply. In this case, I might just take the text I had up here, because it's got sort of the the basic properties what we're looking for. The first is temporarily immune for 24 hours. This says this temporarily immune to necrophitic paralysis for 24 hours. So unlike the other one, which just had that by itself sort of non-discriminately or non-descriptively, um, I want to add in a little bit of that extra. So temporary immune to necrophitic paralysis for 24 hours. I have to make sure this matches up. Might have been easier for me just to capture this all, cut and paste it directly from there. But we can see that's got the string we're looking for. And instead of being immune to Dance of Death, I want to change this to necrophitic paralysis. And that will just be, again, an indicator that this character is immune to this now that he's made his saving throw. Again, it's not going to prevent me from being able to do fortitude saves and apply that on it, but sometimes it's nice to know, especially if you have, let's say, a long dungeon where you're going to have multiple days in there. You might run into instances of the Necrophidiuses later on, and it'll be good to have Mario know or remember that he's still immune to it. It does mean that as you come up to the next day, you might have to try to kind of mentally keep track of when you think it should end. But if I know my players, and I do, they would much rather have me have something that reminds them that they're immune, and maybe even have that last a little too long than something that we forget that they're immune to, and then suddenly they're paralyzed when they shouldn't be. So again, we have this string set up. I'm not going to bother putting them on the combat tracker, but if it was up here at target, you could quickly double click it or drag and drop, and now we can see Nario now has an effect called Immune Necrophitic Paralysis, which will be an indicator that at least for a day, and I could obviously put into that text if it makes it a little easier, 24 hours. If you want a little more details, and could have added it here too, 24 hours here as well, or maybe even something up, something after it like a semicolon 24 hours, so that in case there comes a time when Trenlo has immunity set against power, so that a simple immune necrophitic paralysis will handle powers that are named the same as this immunity string. The automation will be built in, and you won't even have to worry about having things like the DC 20s and the paralysis stuff ever fail. But for now, that the immunities are set against certain kind of trait type of items, so like immune to fires and other conditions, things. I think almost anything that's been traded now, I think, can have immunities to it. I could be wrong. I want to say that's true. But essentially, we've now gone through this, have some automation here. This creature is ready to roll. If I were to take off the old one and put on the latest and greatest version, when we come down and look at its effects, we could see Dance of Death with all of its different effects, and the necrophitic paralysis with its saving throws, paralysis applications, and immunities are all set there. So that one's done. And it was a bit to that, and maybe I took a little long-winded approach to this, but if anyone was really looking at a step-by-step approach to how to set up automation, hopefully this video will have gotten you there. So good luck out there. I'm certainly open to have more inquiries made into how to do automation for creatures, and otherwise good luck, and may all your creatures give the players a hard time.